Understanding words is what you really need to start doing. If you put an S in front of words, it becomes swords. And that's what words are. They're cutting. They can cause you great trouble. Humans are word-controlled creatures. For he that would be deceived, let him. If you are so ignorant as to be deceived, then that's your business. That's your problem. So you need to do your homework and find out what the words mean.
There's a force hidden in plain sight. It moves through every conversation, every thought spoken aloud, every whisper in the dark. Most people use it carelessly, unaware of its weight. But the ancients knew. They understood that words are not just sounds that fade into air. They are architects of reality itself. This ancient understanding captures something many overlook: the profound truth that what is spoken, thought, or heard carries real power. Words are not passive symbols. They are active forces capable of building worlds or tearing them down. From the sacred utterances of Egyptian priests to the incantations of medieval mystics, language has been wielded as the ultimate creative tool, a form of magic both literal and transformative. But what if this power isn't confined to the past? What if it remains alive in every sentence spoken today, ready to turn confusion into clarity, fear into courage, limitation into possibility? What happens when someone awakens to this truth? The concept of words as power is not new. It has existed across every civilization that ever sought to understand the invisible. In ancient traditions, the practice of using words to shape reality was called by many names: incantation, invocation, prayer, affirmation. But beneath all these names lies a single principle: sound creates form. Vibration becomes matter. Thought becomes thing. This is not mysticism detached from reality. Modern science has begun to confirm what the ancients always knew. Cymatics, the study of visible sound vibration, shows that sound frequencies can organize matter into geometric patterns. When sound waves pass through sand or water, they create intricate shapes, mandalas of order emerging from chaos. The frequency determines the form. Change the sound and the pattern changes. The human voice operates on this same principle. Every word spoken carries a frequency. Every sentence creates a vibration that ripples outward, affecting not just the air, but the consciousness of those who hear it. And most importantly, the consciousness of the one who speaks it. Throughout history, those who understood this power guarded it carefully. It was the foundation of what the world calls magic. But magic in its truest sense was never about defying natural laws. It was about understanding them so deeply that reality could be worked with, shaped, aligned. And the primary tool for this work was always the word. This journey into the power of language takes us back to a civilization that existed long before recorded history. A place where the science of sound and the art of creation were one. That place was Atlantis. Atlantis, according to ancient accounts, was not just an advanced society in terms of technology or architecture. It was a civilization that understood consciousness itself. The Atlanteans, it is said, possessed knowledge of vibrational science, the understanding that everything in existence is fundamentally frequency. And they knew how to use sound, particularly the spoken word, to influence the physical world. In Atlantis, words were considered sacred instruments. To speak was to create. To name something was to give it power. The priests and wise ones of Atlantis trained for years to master the art of vocalization. Not just what was said, but how it was said. Tone, rhythm, intention, all of it mattered. A word spoken with clarity and purpose could heal. A word spoken with malice or carelessness could destroy. But as often happens in human history, the power became corrupted. Some among the Atlanteans began to use their knowledge not to harmonize with the natural order, but to dominate it. They twisted the sacred science of sound into a means of control. Words became weapons. Invocations became curses. What was meant to create balance was used to create imbalance. According to the traditions, this corruption contributed to the fall of Atlantis. When power is misused, when the tools of creation are turned toward domination, the result is always collapse. The very forces that once built the civilization turned against it. The story of Atlantis serves as a warning. Words carry consequence, and those who wield them without ethics pay a price. When Atlantis fell, its knowledge did not vanish. It scattered. Some of it found its way to Egypt, carried by survivors who became the seed of a new priesthood. And in Egypt, the tradition of sacred language flourished once again. Ancient Egypt was a civilization built on the power of the word. The Egyptians believed that to speak the name of something was to give it life. This is why the names of the gods were so carefully guarded, why the true name of a pharaoh was kept secret, why certain words were only spoken in ritual contexts. Language was not communication alone, it was invocation. The concept of Heka, often translated as magic, was central to Egyptian spirituality. But Heka was not supernatural. It was the natural power of speech and intention combined. The priests of Egypt understood that words, when spoken with the correct vibration and focus, could influence health, fortune, even the journey of the soul after death. One of the most powerful practices in ancient Egypt was the use of the words of power. These were specific phrases, often carved into tombs or written on papyrus scrolls, meant to protect the deceased in the afterlife. The belief was that these words, once spoken or read, became reality. They created safe passage. They warded off danger. They opened doors in the invisible world. But as in Atlantis, the knowledge became monopolized. The priests, who once served as bridges between the people and the divine, began to hoard this sacred language. Words that should have empowered the many were kept for the few. And in doing so, they created a system where language became a tool of control rather than liberation. The masses were taught to fear certain words, to revere others, but never to understand them. Superstition replaced comprehension, and the power of language, which should have been a birthright, became a privilege. This pattern, knowledge guarded by an elite, used to manipulate rather than educate, would repeat itself across centuries. The legacy of Egypt's sacred language spread. It influenced the mystics of Greece, the Kabbalists of Israel, the magicians of medieval Europe. Each carried forward the understanding that words are more than symbols. They are forces. But each also carried forward the danger that this force could be misused. One of the most striking examples of this misuse appears in the legend of Solomon, the wise king of Israel. Solomon, according to tradition, possessed a ring inscribed with the true name of God. With this ring, he could command spirits, control the elements, and bend reality to his will. The power came not from the ring itself, but from the word inscribed upon it, the sacred name that held the vibration of creation. But even Solomon's wisdom had limits. The text warned that toward the end of his life, he became consumed by his own power. The same knowledge that brought him wisdom also led him into excess. He summoned entities he could not fully control. He spoke words whose consequences he did not foresee. And the result was chaos, both in his kingdom and within himself. This is the paradox of a word. It can elevate or destroy. It can heal or harm. And the difference lies not in the word itself, but in the intention behind it and the consciousness of the one who speaks it. The medieval period saw the rise of grimoires, books of magic filled with incantations, invocations, and rituals. These texts promised power to those who could master the words within them. But many who sought this power did so without understanding the fundamental principle that words work not because they're mystical formulas, but because they shape the mind of the speaker. A word repeated becomes a belief. A belief repeated becomes reality. This is not superstition. This is psychology. This is neuroscience. This is the mechanics of how consciousness creates experience. The magicians of old knew this, even if they described it differently. They understood that to speak a thing with conviction, with focus, with emotion, was to program it into the fabric of reality. Not because the universe was a genie granting wishes, but because the mind, once aligned with a clear intention, begins to perceive and act in ways that bring that intention into form. But like the priests of Egypt, many medieval practitioners hoarded this knowledge. They dressed it in elaborate ritual, in complex symbols, in obscure languages, not to preserve its purity, but to maintain exclusivity. And in doing so, they lost the essence of the teaching, that the power of the word belongs to everyone because everyone speaks. This brings us to the present. The tradition of wielding words as power has not disappeared. It has simply changed form. Today, the science of influence, persuasion, and psychological manipulation has replaced the language of magic. But the principles remain identical. Consider modern advertising. Every commercial, every slogan, every brand message is a carefully crafted incantation designed to shape perception and behavior. Words are chosen not for their truth, but for their impact. Phrases are repeated until they become beliefs. Just do it, because you're worth it. Think different. These are not mere taglines. They are spells cast into the collective consciousness, shaping how millions of people see themselves and the world. Sales techniques operate on the same foundation. Neuro-linguistic programming, anchoring, reframing. These are modern names for ancient practices. The salesperson who mirrors body language, who uses specific words to trigger emotional responses, who repeats key phrases to embed suggestions. This is ceremonial magic in a business suit. Even the language of self-help and manifestation carries the same structure. Affirmations, visualizations, scripting, all of these are rooted in the understanding that words shape reality. The difference is that today, this knowledge is packaged and sold, often without the ethical framework that once accompanied it. And here lies the danger. Just as in Atlantis, just as in Egypt, the power of words can be used to manipulate. When language is weaponized, when it is used to exploit, to deceive, to control, it creates imbalance. And that imbalance always has consequences, not just for those targeted, but for those who wield the words carelessly. Think about the language used in politics. The way certain words are chosen to provoke fear or outrage. The way narratives are constructed to divide rather than unite. The way truth becomes secondary to impact. This is dark magic in the modern age. The use of language to manipulate consciousness for personal or collective gain, without regard for the harm it causes. But there is another way. Just as there has always been a corrupted path, there has also always been a sacred one. The path of using words not to control, but to create. Not to manipulate, but to align. Not to dominate, but to harmonize. This is the true magic of language, and it begins with awareness. Every word spoken is a choice. Every sentence is a declaration of intention. To speak carelessly is to create carelessly. To speak with awareness is to create consciously. The power has always been there. The question is whether it will be used with wisdom or squandered in ignorance. There are practices, both ancient and modern, that teach how to wield words with integrity. In the yogic tradition, this is called satya, truthful speech. The practice involves not just speaking truth, but speaking in a way that uplifts. Words should be true, necessary, kind, and timely. If a word does not meet these criteria, it is better left unspoken. In Buddhism, there is the concept of right speech, one of the components of the Eightfold Path. It teaches that words should not harm, should not divide, should not deceive. Speech should be used to bring clarity, to heal, to unite. This is not about censorship or suppression. It is about intentionality. Even in the Western mystical traditions, there is the practice of the sacred word or logos. This involves choosing a word or phrase that represents the highest intention and repeating it, silently or aloud, as a form of alignment. The word becomes a tuning fork, bringing the mind and emotions into resonance with a higher frequency. These practices are not religious dogma. They are practical tools. They work because they align the speaker with the principle that words create reality. When someone speaks with intention, with clarity, with presence, the effect is tangible. Doors open, opportunities arise, relationships shift, not because the universe is granting wishes, but because the mind, aligned with a clear purpose, begins to see and act in ways that bring that purpose into being. But this power requires responsibility. The more conscious someone becomes of the effect of their words, the more accountable they become for what they create. Complaining shapes a reality of lack. Gratitude shapes a reality of abundance. Criticism shapes a reality of judgment. Compassion shapes a reality of connection. The choice, moment by moment, word by word, is always present. There's a story from the Sufi tradition about a master and a student. The student asked, "Master, why do you speak so little?" The master replied, "Because every word I speak either builds a bridge or a wall. And I would rather build fewer bridges with care than many walls with carelessness." This is the essence of the teaching. Words are not neutral. They are never just words. They are vibrations. They are energies. They are seeds planted in the soil of consciousness, and they will grow, whether into weeds or flowers depends on what was planted. So the question becomes, what is being spoken into existence each day? What reality is being created through the words chosen, the thoughts repeated, the narratives believed? Are those words creating limitations or possibility? Fear or courage? Separation or unity? The power is already there. It has always been there. The ancients did not discover it. They simply remembered it. And now, the invitation is to remember it again, to recognize that every conversation is a ritual. Every sentence is an incantation. Every word is a spell being cast into the world. And the most profound realization is this: the person most affected by those words is not the listener. It is the speaker, because the subconscious mind does not distinguish between what is said to others and what is said about the self. It simply absorbs and believes. Speak defeat, and the body becomes defeated. Speak strength, and the body responds with strength. This is why the sages always emphasize self-mastery before attempting to shape the external world. The magician who cannot govern their own speech cannot govern anything else. The one who speaks carelessly to themselves will create carelessly for themselves. The work always begins within. The practice then is simple but not easy. It begins with observation, noticing what is said throughout the day, noticing the tone, the emotion, the intention behind the words, not with judgment, but with awareness. Because awareness is the first step toward change. From there, the practice becomes refinement. Choosing words more carefully. Speaking less when silence serves better. Speaking more when truth needs voice. Replacing habitual phrases of lack with phrases of possibility, replacing words of fear with words of faith, not as affirmations empty of meaning, but as conscious choices rooted in intention. Over time, this practice transforms reality, not overnight, not through miracles or shortcuts, but through the slow, steady accumulation of aligned words, creating aligned thoughts, creating aligned actions, creating aligned outcomes. This is the true magic, not the dramatic, the flashy, the instant, but the consistent, the intentional, the disciplined. The hidden truth about magic is that it was never hidden at all. It was always in plain sight, spoken every day by everyone. The difference is that most speak unconsciously, unaware that they are shaping their world with every utterance. But once someone becomes aware, once they see that words are not just communication, but creation, everything changes. The reality being experienced right now is, in large part, the result of the words that have been spoken, both aloud and silently, over weeks, months, years. And the reality that will be experienced tomorrow is being shaped by the words spoken today. So the invitation is this: speak as though words matter, because they do. Speak as though reality is listening, because it is. Speak as though every sentence is a brush stroke painting the canvas of existence, because that is exactly what it is. The ancients built temples with words. They healed bodies with words. They transformed consciousness with words. And that same power is available now, in this moment, to anyone willing to use it with awareness, with integrity, with purpose. The spell has already been cast. The only question is, who cast it? And will the next one be spoken with greater care? The only way to align with this creative power is through conscious awareness. Practice observing your words. Practice choosing them with intention. And watch as reality begins to shift, not because of magic, but because of mastery.